Hi, I'm Caroline Mitchell, canine behaviourist at Good Doggy. If you have a reactive dog that is sometimes reactive to one kind of trigger, but maybe not another, you maybe spend some time trying to figure out what the pattern might be. If your dog is reactive to some dogs but not others, maybe they're reactive to tall men or children, any kind of selective reactivity will cause you to kind of figure out exactly what is triggering your dog and help you sort of predict what's coming up. So patterns of behaviour are actually really important. Our brains are designed actually to look for patterns. So we have a part of our brain, the outside bit, which is found in all mammals, and this makes pattern finding possible. These are important because we need patterns in order to make us better at survival. So as hunters and gatherers, our ancestors would have looked for patterns in things that we were hunting, things we were running away from, things we were trying to avoid. So these patterns, this pattern seeking part of our brain is actually very, very important for keeping us alive. Obviously, we don't really need it for that anymore. But it's still active all the time. So these neurons here are specifically looking for patterns. And now we don't have to hunt. We don't have to run away from things. We find patterns in other things. We find patterns in our friends' behaviour. We find patterns everywhere we look, so that we use these patterns to try and predict what's coming next. And that helps us change our own behaviour. So patterns are really important. Our dogs look for patterns as well. They watch us all day long and they figure out our patterns of behaviour. They know when we're going to go out and we're going to take them with us. They know when we're leaving them to go to work. They know all kinds of things just based on which shoes we pick up or the words that we say. We think we're outwitting them when we say a W-A-L-K, but they soon figure out that pattern too, and they associate it with other behaviours. And before long, they know that when we talk in that kind of tone, in that kind of way, that they're going for a walk, So patterns are very important to our dogs, but for this particular video, I'm really focusing on us looking for patterns in a reactive dog's behaviour. This will help us make rehab easier. So it's quite frustrating when you can't find a pattern because you don't know how to predict what's coming next. You don't know whether you should be working with your dog. Should you be training them? Should you be ready? What should you be doing? So figuring out those patterns is actually really important. So if we can't figure them out, how do we know what's coming next? This is obviously very, very stressful. So what kind of patterns might we be looking for? So patterns that we might be looking for could be things like a breed of dog. So maybe your dog only reacts to a certain breed or type, maybe dogs that don't have tails, or maybe dogs that behave in a certain way. Certain breeds have specific behaviours. Collies like to lie down and wait on other dogs to approach. They kind of take a stalking stance. Some dogs like whippets have very, very low tails. They can be different from other dogs that have very high tails. Akitas have big curly tails. Some dogs have their ears very pricked up. Some dogs have them very soft. So there's lots of kind of breed or type traits that maybe you could be looking for. If your dog is reactive to people, maybe workmen, they're quite loud and can be unpredictable. Often they wear a similar kind of clothing, so it's easy for our dogs to separate them from other people, and that clothing can become associated with workmen. They have specific boots on, high-vis jackets, that kind of stuff. Maybe a dog has been scared of a workman. Maybe they've been working and they've dropped something or shouted near them, or they've made a noise with a piece of equipment that they're using, that kind of thing. So they'll start to associate all of that with that workman. So that can be something to look for. Maybe things like dogs that have a specific kind of way of breathing. We've got short-nosed dogs, can sometimes huff and puff. It can sound a little bit grumbly and growly for some dogs that are not used to it. Some dogs have a bulged out eyes, so that can look a little bit like they're staring. Black dogs are the same. They can look like they're staring. So as well as type, maybe a different colour of dog. And that works as well for people that have darker skin. Their eyes can sometimes pop against the colour. That white of the eye can cause them to look like they're staring as well. So maybe in terms of people, perhaps the dog is reactive to people with darker coloured skin. They're not racist, it's just that that's how that white of the eye stands out to them. And they've interpreted that as being an aggressive thing. Maybe kids move fast, they make funny noises, they're very high pitched, they can be unpredictable. So when you're looking for patterns in your dog's behaviour, maybe it's kids specifically that your dog is reactive to, rather than other adults or different kinds of people, perhaps people, cyclists and joggers and things like that. But people that move fast, joggers and cyclists and people on scooters, skateboards, roller skates, that kind of thing. So maybe that's the kind of person that your dog is reactive to. We can look for patterns in whether maybe another dog is the trigger. So perhaps whether they're neutered or not neutered. Their age, are they puppies? Are they older? Puppies tend to behave differently to older dogs. They can be a bit kind of more, sometimes they can be a little bit rude in their behaviour, and some dogs object to that. They can also be a bit like kids. They move fast and they're quite excitable. They like to play a lot, whereas a much older dog might be a bit more steady and a bit ploddy. That comes down again a bit to how predictable they are. A puppy or a child is going to be much less predictable than an adult or an older dog who's a bit more settled in their behaviour. Your dog will be able to read what they're doing. They'll be able to read their calmness, their energy, and they'll know roughly, what to expect from them. Again, these dogs are using patterns to predict the outcome. So they're like us, looking for patterns in things that are scaring them, and they're seeing those patterns and responding to those. But we'll come a bit more to that just in a minute. And your dog's experience is what's basically going to decide, as I say, what kind of pattern you might be looking for. So at the very, very start, something will have triggered this all off. And from there, this has become a problem. They've started to see it in other things. So that brings us neatly onto how dogs generalise behaviour. Again, they're using patterns to do this. And this is a very important learning tool, as well as being a survival tool. For us, we can learn very, very much, very, very quickly by using patterns of behaviour. It means we don't have to waste time learning about every single little thing we come across. So, for example, as a child, we would have been learning to cross the road. We learn about cars. Cars move fast, we can get run over by cars, and that would be dangerous for us. We got taught not to walk in front of them. We got taught to look both ways. But we weren't actually just looking both ways because of cars. We learn about cars, but other things are like cars. So we didn't need to be taught how to manage the road in front of cars, and then again, how to manage the road in front of vans, or how to manage the road in front of lorries and buses and things like that. We applied what we knew about cars, and we spotted that pattern, and we generalized it to other things on the road. The first time a child sees a tractor coming towards them, they didn't walk in front of it thinking it would be different. They assumed it would be the same as things that are like it. And that is really important. That's how we learn things without having to learn every single tiny little detail. So it's much, much faster way to learn. And we might be wrong, but most of the time, this principle works very, very well. Our ancestors, this would have helped them too. They wouldn't have had to learn to stay away from lions and then had to relearn that to stay away from tigers and then relearn to stay away from bears. They went, animals that are this size, that move fast, have big teeth, we avoid them, we run away from them. So it wasn't a process that needed to be repeated over and over and over and over again. We were told, don't go near lions, they are dangerous. And then we assumed everything that was like lions would be the same. So that's important. It's about that similarity and that likeness. So let's put that into our dog's reactivity. Let's say that our dog had an initial bad experience with a small black dog. So very initially, they would have been aversive towards small black dogs, but also using this method of learning now, they would start to look at other small dogs and also other black dogs. So they've started to generalize, just like we did with cars and lions and other things that we've learned about in life. They've started to generalize because it keeps them safe to do that. So now, rather than just being scared of small black dogs, it's small dogs and black dogs and small black dogs. And that will then grow, and that leads us then to other colours of dogs, which, because small dogs come in all different colours. So now white dogs might be a problem, and so on. Large dogs come in different breeds. So dogs that are like those will also be grouped in with this. So you can see this is going to grow. As soon as your dog has established other things that are like the thing they're scared of, then that gets bigger. And then those things, then the same happens again. The dog will generalize those things to things that are like them. And then it goes out to a whole nother set of stuff, and so on. So even small white dogs might end up becoming people carrying carrier bags, because from a distance, a person carrying a carrier bag with shopping in might look like they're walking a small dog. So they've generalized. It's similar. They also might generalize fast moving things, chasing balls and things like that with small people, people on skateboards, roller skates, that kind of stuff. So actually, reactivity doesn't even stay within the kind of species even. It can grow into other things. So it doesn't have to be just dogs, people, small people, bags, people pushing trolley bags, all this kind of stuff. It can grow and grow and grow. So at this point now, it's very hard to discover the pattern because the pattern has grown and it has been generalized. But if you can think back to the initial experience, then that might help you know at least where you started from. But many people don't ever know what the initial experience was. So we've got some obvious patterns. We can see what happens when we start to generalize. We get to lose those patterns. But there's some other patterns maybe you didn't think to look for. So lots of dogs that I work with, people will report to me there is no pattern to their behaviour, and they find this really frustrating because you'll find that maybe you start to think there is, and then as you start to test it, it starts to unravel and you realise actually there's not that at all. So when there's no pattern of behaviour, there are usually two reasons for this. One we can see is that the problem is very mild, so it's not always visible. So maybe the dog is afraid of big dogs, have had a bad experience. The behavior hasn't started to generalize yet, but actually they're still kind of nervous of other dogs, but it's not enough that they show a visible response to it. So check out my other video I've made about visible behavior and invisible behavior, because that kind of explains this in a lot more detail. But basically, every behavior is on an emotional scale. It all starts at 0 and it will escalate. There'll be an element, a level on that scale where the behavior is mild enough that we won't notice. Imagine yourself being kind of anxious. You may be walking around a supermarket and you're doing things, but people might not notice until actually you start to come and talk to them. You start to be a bit more vocal about it. So there's a threshold there where underneath that threshold, anxiety is not visible. Your dog is internalizing that. They're keeping it to themselves. And dogs do that a lot because they don't want to be seen as weak. Just like pain, emotional pain is no different. A dog can walk around on a limp for a while. If it's not too bad, you'll not know it's there. And the same with anxiety. If it's not too bad, you'll not know they're having it. But they maybe are in that process now of starting to generalize. So there'll be lots of situations that are similar to the one that you can see. And because he's keeping that internal, you'll not see that. And therefore, you'll not be able to know if that is forming part of the pattern or not, because you just can't see it. Because we're looking for physical things that we can see, that we can group together. But actually, it might be to do with the dog and the trigger itself, the relationship that they're having in that actual moment. So whenever your dog spots a trigger in the distance, it's easy to kind of think about how this might work with another dog. So they see a dog coming towards them, immediately they start to feel a little bit anxious on the inside. They haven't got anxious enough that you can see that, but it's starting to happen, and they start to have a conversation with the other dog. So their body language will be changing, the other dog's body language will be changing as well, tails will change, ears will change, and so there'll be lots of changes that are happening. Between these two dogs, this is them having a conversation, and as they get closer and closer to each other, they'll be making decisions and choices, and they'll be deciding how they wish to interact with each other. So maybe the dog that you're approaching is quite keen to come and see your dog, but maybe your dog's giving them lots of vibes. Maybe they've stiffened up a little bit and made themselves a little bit taller. They might have stiffened their ears. They might kind of be staring a little bit. There could be lots of different body language they're giving off. And they're basically asking the other dog, I'm kind of a little bit anxious about you. Please, can you just keep going? I don't want to talk to you. I'm not feeling sociable right now. If that other dog then ignores your dog's communication and they continue to come towards you, then that's going to trigger a response. It might not be the other dog's fault. The other dog might respond to your dog's message and say, yeah, don't worry, mate, I'll just go and play over here, except for they're trapped on their lead and they're now at the mercy of their owner and where their owner wants them to go. So they might actually even be forced to come towards you. So that might trigger a response for them as well. So both of these dogs have probably decided not to talk to each other, but actually they've been forced into doing this. Other situations might be that a dog actually is ignoring your dog and just really wants to come and play, and they're off their lead, they run over and they instigate kind of play, and your dog is now triggered by that. So you're not actually able to see a pattern between different breeds of dog, different sizes of dog, different colours, neutering status. None of that stuff is actually easy to figure out in these situations. The problem is the conversation that's had between the dog, and your dog will have a conversation with every single dog they come across in the park. They'll have a conversation with every single bike, every person, every bin, everything. They'll be giving off body language, which is telling us what exactly is that they want or don't want from an interaction with this trigger, whatever that object might be. And as people, we're not very good at spotting that. So as an owner, start looking at that. Start looking at the approaching dog's language, the body language. How do they look? Start looking at your own dog's body language. How do they look? Start noticing patterns in that. That might be where your pattern of behaviour falls. But you still, at this stage, might not be able to find a pattern at all. So if you can't find a pattern, then we have to do what our dogs eventually will do, and that is generalise this problem. So if our dog is reactive to some black dogs, some neutered dogs, some big dogs, some small dogs, we're not really sure. Could be this one, probably Alsatians. It could be, if that's the kind of the thought process that you're going through when it's a bit muddy and you can't predict it, generalise. Generalise as far as you can. You might even just have to say, well, he'll be all right with some dogs, but not others, all dogs. So when you now start to train with your dog, you are, regardless of how you think he's going to behave, you are going to go through exactly the same steps. You are going to assume that he is going to struggle with the dog that you're approaching. And you could be right, because it could be one of those situations where he's internalized that struggle. It's not bad enough that you've noticed. It's certainly not bad enough that he's started to lunge and bark and react in that kind of big way that you're used to spotting. So generalize, not just this dog or this dog or this dog, all dogs. Even dogs that you know he's going to be good with. If you think he's really always going to be good with white fluffy dogs, he's never reacted to one of those, it could be internal. So just, if it's a dog, it's all dogs. If it's a kind of person, if you think, well, maybe it's their voice, maybe it's the way they stand, there's information about that person that you don't know, maybe some women are not other women, and you're sort of starting to think about maybe there's a hormone trigger, maybe pregnant women, you wouldn't necessarily ask a woman in the street if she was pregnant, but maybe, you're sort of starting to kind of look really deep. Don't do that. Just generalize. It's all women. If occasionally it's men, then it's all people. If it's occasionally it's kids, it's all people, all ages. And you are going to just generalize. So whatever process you're doing to train them, hopefully you're trying to create some distance from the trigger. You're trying to create opportunities that can be rewarded by making sure that you have given enough space between your dog and whatever it is that's triggering them. So you're not just going to do this by things that you think they might do it for all of them. The same with traffic, maybe you think that your dog is responsive to some cars, very large cars, maybe all vans, trailers, and you're starting to sort of lose the clarity about what it is. Then it's just all traffic, everything from a bike to a lorry and a bus. Any traffic that comes near you, treat it exactly the same as you would something you know that is going to trigger your dog. When you work like this and you overgeneralize, what happens is that you're ready for every single situation. And you're able to help them in every single situation. So it actually doesn't matter whether they would have been triggered or not. They've got that reward and they can associate that with something that's just happened, which is similar to something that has scared them. So this is always going to give you points. Even if they would have walked past and done nothing, you'll still get training points for this because it is similar to something that they are scared of. They will have generalized it to a degree, so you can't lose. But what you do gain is 100% success rate. You won't get caught out. You're not going to be going, oh, I thought perhaps he wouldn't have done it this time to that bike or that car or whatever. And then he gets triggered and that sets you back in your training. None of that's going to happen to you. You're not going to get caught out. You're going to get 100% success rate. And even if you train him in situations where it didn't matter, who cares? What went wrong there? He just got a treat. Maybe you gave him some clicks, you gave him his, reward marking word, whatever it is that you're doing with him. He would have felt good about that situation. And you can't lose if your dog's feeling good about something, even if they don't know why, it doesn't matter. So when you are struggling to find a pattern, it could just be that it's not very obvious, it's not easy to see, or your dog is in the process of generalizing and that behavior is just hidden from sight right now in some situations, so you're not able to see the pattern. Doesn't matter though, you're going to generalize instead and you train them for everything that is a bit like what they are reacting to, and you can't go wrong. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll speak to you soon. Take care for now. Bye bye.